Good morning, everyone. Hi. I'm Kimberly Hillen, and I want to introduce our guest speaker for today on behalf of the Clarkdale Historical Society and Museum. Since Tuzigoot Pueblo was first excavated back in 1933, generations of archaeologists, National Park Service staff, volunteers, youth crews, and descendant communities have shared a single vital mission: to protect and preserve one of Verde Valley's most important cultural landmarks. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on nearly a century of that dedication, craftsmanship, and stewardship, exploring the incredible people and projects that have protected Tuzigoot from its excavation to present day. To guide us through this history, we are joined by an expert who lives and breathes this work. Lucas Hoedl is an archaeologist and the Cultural Resource Program Manager at Montezuma Castle and Tuzigoot National Monuments. Lucas has spent nearly 2 decades studying and preserving the rich history of the American Southwest and Western Mexico. He holds his master's degree in anthropology from the University of Colorado, Denver, and specializes in the management and preservation of prehistoric architecture right here in central Arizona. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Lucas Hoedl.
Can everybody hear me all right? All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for that warm introduction. My name is Lucas Hoedl. Like Kim mentioned, I'm the Cultural Resource Program Manager and Archaeologist for the Verde Valley monuments that include Tuzigoot, Montezuma Castle, and Montezuma Well. I've had the fortunate privilege of being at these monuments now 11 years, which in Park Service time is a fair amount of time. Typically people don't stick around that long, so it's kind of indicative of the amazing resources that we have here in the valley. Today I'd like to share a story about Tuzigoot Pueblo and the many people who preserved it for nearly a century. Preservation focuses not only on the archaeology of the site itself, but also the archaeologists, the local families, preservation crews, tribal communities, and the National Park Service employees whose efforts have helped transform Tuzigoot from a hilltop site into the monument we know today. This presentation follows Tuzigoot from its earliest written documentation and descriptions through the excavations, preservation, and modern stewardship that we focus on now. One of the major themes today is that preservation has always been community-driven. Local residents, laborers, students, preservation crews, and descendant communities all have played a vital role in keeping the Pueblo standing. We as a National Park Service have a mission to protect and preserve in perpetuity for future generations this site. So it's kind of deceiving as a site. It looks in a ruinous state, but we spend a lot of time and effort to keep it in that way. In perpetuity, just for the information that we can gather from the place. So it has taken years and years of work, and will take many years to come to preserve it and provide that information for archaeologists and visitors and anybody to understand just the importance of the place here. So kind of delving into the earliest knowledge about the area. The first documented European arrival in the Verde Valley was that of the Spanish explorer Antonio de Espejo, which he detailed in his 1583 accounts. Following these initial explorations, there's been numerous Spanish and European groups that have traveled through and settled in the Verde Valley, just because of the amazing and rich resources that are here. The earliest known written description of Tuzigoot comes from that of Antoine Leroux. He was a trail guide that participated in 2 expeditions to help survey proposed routes for the Transcontinental Railroad. He joined Emil Weeks Whipple in his 1854 expedition along the 35th parallel. During this period, he documented extensive stone ruins by the Verde River in his journal. This journal was later published in 1855. And you'll see the quote up here. This is one of the earliest written documentation specifically that kind of describes some of the archaeological resources here. The riverbanks were covered with ruins of stone houses and regular fortifications, which had not been occupied for centuries. They were built upon the most fertile tracts in the valley. They were signs of acequias and of cultivation. The walls were of solid masonry of rectangular form, some 20 or 30 paces in length, and yet remained 10 or 15 feet in height. At this time, the site was not yet called Tuzigoot, but the accounts represent some of the first written references to the Pueblo, of Pueblos in the Verde Valley. So even early on, these structures had a symbol, were a sign of importance that people were willing to document these things. During the late 19th century, growing interest in the pre-contact sites of the Verde Valley led to some of the earliest formal archaeological investigations of the region. By this time, numerous articles and travel accounts had been published describing the area's cliff dwellings and pueblos, often emphasizing their accessibility to visitors and explorers alike. Among the earliest was Dr. Edgar Mearns. Burns was an army surgeon stationed at Fort Verde between 1884 and 1888. In 1890, Mearns published Ancient Dwellings of the Rio Verde Valley in the Popular Science Monthly magazine. As the first scientific study devoted to the pre-contact sites of the Verde Valley, his article provided the earliest published description of Tuzigoot Pueblo specifically, and also helped formalize the name Montezuma Castle, a designation that is still in use today. So that was the first actual written documentation for Montezuma Castle in that article as well. Building upon this early work, Smithsonian researchers began conducting more systematic documentation of archaeological sites throughout the Verde Valley. Notably, you can see Edgar Mearns on the left there, but you have Cosmos Mindeleff. You probably heard of the Mindeleff Cavates in Camp Verde, and Jesse Walter Fuchs. They produced some of the region's earliest formal archaeological surveys and architectural studies during the late 19th and early 20th century. Together, their works of Mearns, Mindeleff, and Fuchs and other investigators laid the foundation for archaeological research, preservation efforts, and eventual establishment of protected sites that would follow in the 20th century. So these gentlemen definitely provided the foundation for a lot of what we do today. I did use as a background, and if you've been to Tuzigoot Pueblo, we feature this picture in the background of Tuzigoot Ridge itself prior to excavation. So this is what folks would have seen coming into the valley. Kind of moving forward in time a little bit, the landscape around Tuzigoot played a major role in both prehistoric settlement and later historic development. The Verde River, wetlands, and marshes, such as Tavashi Marsh, created an environment that supported agricultural and settlement for centuries. It's what made the area so rich and valuable to folks moving in. This landscape would later be heavily altered by additional irrigation projects, the mining operations here, as well as industrial development. But it's the underlying factor is the water, specifically around Tuzigoot Ridge, the springs right there, that provided such rich farmland that drew people in once again for thousands of years. And it was still very important, even into the early 20th century. By the late 1800s, there were both Mexican-American and Anglo families that were farming and ranching near Tuzigoot Hill. Families such as the Mesa family, Hawkins, O'Shea, and Goodwin families, amongst others, developed irrigation systems and cultivated the surrounding land. There's probably a multitude of photos out there, but these are the ones that we have in our archive collection of the Mesa family. And so it's just a real kind of important part of understanding that early part of the history there. Their stories are important because these sometimes are overlooked with us at the monument. I'm going to focus a lot on preservation, but it's a lot of those folks that kind of helped develop the area and formalize what the monument is going to become later on. So they have a huge impact later on. And I talked to a couple of you before this presentation, just kind of mentioned that we've worked on getting oral histories for the monument and their relation. So we only have a handful at this point, but one of the most valuable that we have comes from John Tavashi Sr., who grew up near Tuzigoot, and he describes the environmental impacts of the smelter, and the earliest archaeological excavations at the site. His oral histories have provided a vivid firsthand account of life in the Verde Valley during this period. So as I kind of go through, yeah, this might be a future ask for other folks that have stories about the monument itself, just so we get a better understanding of why we're a national monument and the impacts and the community around us. And kind of moving forward, another hugely important aspect of the area here is mining and the industrial expansion that took place. So as the rapid growth of the mining industry in Jerome and Clarkdale during the late 19th and early 20th century brought significant economic and environmental changes to the Verde Valley. As mining operations expanded, the United Verde Copper Company acquired large tracts of agricultural land that surrounded Tuzigoot Ridge, including the property on which Tuzigoot Pueblo is located today. Some of the connection with John Tavashi's, his family actually leased the land from the mine that Tuzigoot Ridge actually sat upon. So another deep connection there. These purchases not only supported the company operations, but also helped shield the company from potential legal claims related to the smelter emissions. So it's kind of another underlying aspect of the Pueblo and the area. I don't have any pictures in this presentation, but it definitely impacted operations and work throughout most of the history of the monument up until the last 20 years or so when the tailings were capped. So it had a long history on operations at the monument, and just how how people viewed the place in general. So as we keep moving forward in time, as the Verde Valley entered the Great Depression, mining activities and other sources of employment declined, leaving many residents in need of work. A prominent figure in the Yavapai community was Grace Sparks, a member of the Yavapai County Board of Public Welfare and a later chair of the Yavapai County projects. She recognized that federal relief programs could benefit and provide both economic assistance and lasting community benefits to the area. And it was through her efforts that the Verde Valley secured support from New Deal work programs. This directly resulted in the archaeological excavations at both Tuzigoot not National Monument yet, but at Tuzigoot Pueblo and at Montezuma Castle, as well as improvements to road, visitor infrastructure, and the construction of a new museum at Tuzigoot, the structure and the building that we still use today as our visitor center. While these projects provided much needed employment brought attention to the region's archaeological resources, Sparks understood that long-term preservation require a more permanent solution. Federal work relief funding was only temporary, and there was no guarantee that preservation's efforts would continue once program funding ended. So determined to protect Tuzigoot for future generations, she began advocating for federal protection of the site. In 1934, Sparks launched a campaign to establish a new national monument here, laying the groundwork for the eventual creation of Tuzigoot National Monument, and ensuring the long-term preservation of one of the Verde Valley's most significant cultural sites. So a huge push. And then on the screen here, you'll see an image of Grace, a very prominent figure out of Prescott and the Yavapai County, to the point that she even ended up having a pretty significant pull in Washington. And it was a really remarkable woman, and the efforts that she undertook during that period to better the area, and really had that understanding of the drive of the resources that we have here, and utilizing the archaeological resources, and kind of developing the first kind of archaeotourism based ideology as another source of income, having those folks provide jobs, but other economic areas and growth for the valley. And then another image of the museum under construction there, and I'll talk a little bit that in just a second. Sparks then was able to secure federal funding to excavate, study, and preserve the site that would be known as Tuzigoot Pueblo. Funding from the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, FARA funds, enabled 2 University of Arizona graduate students of the prominent archaeologist Byron Cummings, a name, if you're knowledgeable about Arizona archaeology, really comes to the forefront. He was one of the founding figures in a lot of that archaeological work, even today. And those graduate students, Edward Spicer and Louis Kaywood, were tapped to lead these excavations. They had just completed work at the Fitzmaurice ruin in Prescott. Some of you may have heard of that site. It's kind of towards past like Glassford Hill Road in a subdivision down there. But they completed that excavation, and we're looking for their next site to work on as part of their graduate studies. The site itself was selected based on the recommendations of Earl Jackson, a fellow graduate student who'd grown up near Montezuma Castle. Interesting, Jackson's father was the first monuments caretaker and first custodian at the site. And so Earl was later able to direct Civil Works Administrative funding excavations at the Castle A site. If you've been over there, that's the large pueblo next to the more prominent cliff dwelling, Montezuma Castle. And both of these works took place nearly concurrently on both sides of the valley at the same time. I did add this photo too. So this is the full, both of these are copies of both the full crew shots of the crew that did work on the structure. This one, we actually had it in our visitor center for many years, and I think they still have a copy that we had out there just to identify these folks. So that will be kind of another underlying theme as we kind of go through is there have been a large number of folks that have worked at Tuzigoot through the preservation efforts. But often it's only the project directors, the leaders of the excavation, or that run the preservation programs, that their names are the ones that are indicated on documentation. So there's all these laborers and folks that had specialized skills, but their names kind of got lost to history. So that's been another focus, is really just trying to re-identify those folks, because they have played a really vital role in the preservation efforts and keeping the Pueblo in as good a condition as it is today. So, yep, see, it's one of the photos that you guys showed, and we've got a couple of those that I can share with you, sir. They brought in this photo to show me as well earlier. So, joined by museum assistants Harry Getty and Gordon Baldwin, along with approximately 50 local laborers, many of whom were unemployed miners at the time, as well as members of the local tribal community. The crew began work on October 31st, 1933. As the excavation progressed, the site was given the name, actually, I keep saying Tuzigoot, and that's what the official name is, but the name was given as Tuzigoot, with kind of that WH sound to it, which is a name, a Dilge Apache word that was given, that translates to crooked water. The name is credited to Ben Lewis. If you, let's see if I can go back. It was this gentleman here that officially provided that name. The name had been part of the community, the Apache community, but he's the one that on the crew provided that to Kaywood and Spicer, and then had it move forward officially until it got anglicized through the congressional channels and all those things as things do. And unfortunately, the word Tuzigoot means water on the knee, which is kind of a nonsense word. So when we have folks come in from the local tribal community, they kind of scratch their head a little bit on why it's that way. Whereas Tuzigoot, crooked water is indicative of the water that originally flowed around the ridge the river, it was an oxbow, and the river actually flowed where Tavashi Marsh is, but over the course of a long period of time and flooding and the channel shifted to its current iteration over there. But yeah, crooked water makes a lot more sense than water on the knee. Okay, going back to the funding a little bit, the FARA funds were then followed by Civil Works Administration funds that allowed the work to extend into November and then through June of 1934, resulting in a nearly complete excavation and stabilization of the site, as well as the preservation of numerous objects for display in a future museum. So just kind of also an indicator, it was really about 6 months of excavation work that took place up on the Pueblo, which for archaeologists today in the scope and scale is remarkable. This would have been an archaeologist's career today. And they actually did a remarkable job, and it gives a lot of credit to the laborers and the folks that they had working for them. These miners were extremely skilled at dirt removal and being able to work these types of areas. And so they were able to do a remarkable job, especially for that period, over a really short period of time. So we still look back. Of course, there's still some things that are always left to be desired. You always want more, but they were able to provide a remarkable documentation. And that's actually why, from an archaeological standpoint, just kind of from a lack of excavations, but a whole phase of the southern Sonawa is derived from the excavations there. So the Tuzigoot phase of Sonawa archaeology from 1300 to around 1400 is just really based off of the work that they did during that period. So the project not only revealed one of the region's most significant archaeological sites, but also provided much needed employment and economic relief during kind of the height of the Great Depression. The excavation marked the beginning of preservation efforts that would ultimately lead to the establishment of the monument. I have a quote here from John Tavashi, which I always find interesting, just from his perspective. I watched them digging, and I'd go by there on the horseback, and they got a bang out of seeing a little kid coming up there, but I wasn't that little. And looking around at what they were doing, they dug a lot of that stuff up, and they hauled it to Clarkdale, right there by the post office today. There was a paint and take store. Later, when they moved out, it was a vacant building, and they had long tables. I remember that, and women working there, going through the dirt, and whatever they were looking for. So it's one of those, like I say, the oral histories of just people that kind of experienced it, not only from the inside, but outside, provide really interesting information about what was taking place at that time. Once again, we've got written documentations that create lists and descriptions, but it's those people connections and how things were viewed always provide much more interesting and in-depth information. So just kind of, I've just got a handful of photos, just kind of focused on the people that took place during these excavations. And you can kind of see the scale of the work and the amount of material that they removed during that period. And once again, you got to kind of focus that this was a 6-month period that they removed substantial amounts of dirt and stone. The walls had literally, over the time, collapsed in on themselves and kind of created kind of a protective coating, but it also kind of this false representation of the ridge, but several feet of fill had filled those rooms over the years. So a lot of work went into it. As part of the next phase of the excavation project, 2 sections of the pueblo were also reconstructed, including the entire room block of Group 4, as well as the tower room in Group 3. Reconstruction of archaeological sites was a pretty common practice back in the 1930s and was intended to provide visitors with an immersive experience and a better understanding of how the pueblo may have appeared when it was occupied. However, reconstructions were often an unreliable facsimile of the original, and the practice was largely abandoned in the 1940s. So kind of the challenges with reconstruction, it was based off of what archaeologists thought it should look like. They didn't often talk to tribal members at that time. So it was kind of what they envisioned it should look like rather than what it actually probably did look like. They were pretty close, but there's definitely some things we've found over time that were completely wrong. But it did provide some kind of interesting aspects to it that we still see today. I'll kind of go through. So this is kind of some of the reconstruction. And so, get a little too close. The wooden elements using Group 4, so some of this roofing material, unfortunately was not properly treated for wood-boring insects. And as a result, the structure actually rapidly deteriorated and was deemed unsafe by 1942. So it only had a less than a 10-year lifespan. Unfortunately, they did an amazing job. So the walls and everything was really well locked into place, but because of these wood-boring insects, the roof started collapsing, kind of take things with it. But that only took place in Group 4. The tower room is still there today. So that room in Group 3, I'm sure, if not most of you, all of you have been there, and that's where you can go onto the top and get the sweeping vistas of the area. And so that wood was treated, I don't know if it was differently or better, but most of that wood has survived to the point that we still have visitors and groups that go up there, large groups that go up there today. But it also left kind of a legacy of some interesting features in the remnants of the reconstruction. They did things like they actually had electricity go in there, and there was flicker lights to kind of represent fires, and so we still have some of those components in there today. And so you can see that that as you walk up the trail and that room block there, that's what it looked like by the end of 1935. So fully roofed, and visitors could access it. This is, once again, a practice that we've seen it at different parks and different places during that period, but just because of the challenges, it's not something that you'll see in the Park Service today. We're really focused on preserving what's there and not trying to create something that may or may not have been. That's not our place. So by June of 1934, the excavation at Tuzigoot Pueblo were largely complete. The ruin had been excavated, stabilized, and partially reconstructed, while hundreds of artifacts from the site were prepared for future display to support this planned museum. The display cases were constructed by students in the manual arts program at the Clarkdale High School here in town. reflecting the widespread community involvement in the project. So actually almost all the cases that we have today are still the same cases that were constructed by that group at the high school. And with the archaeological work nearing completion, additional funding became available through additional FARA funds and WPA funds to finalize the construction of the museum. The scale of the undertaking was pretty remarkable for the time, particularly given the economic hardships of the Great Depression. So by the project's completion, approximately $27,575 was spent, was invested in the project there, as well as more than 34,000 labor hours devoted to the excavation, stabilization, and reconstruction and museum construction. So a pretty significant boost during that period. So that was $27,000 in 1930s dollars. So here's some of the folks. It's Kaywood and Spicer, as well as some local community members. So like I mentioned, additional civil works funding was initiated to support the development of the new museum. This effort actually employed primarily Hispanic women from the local community to reconstruct pottery vessels recovered during the excavation. The vacant Wingfield dry goods store here in town was turned into a temporary workshop and laboratory where, quote, truckloads of pottery sherds from the excavation were brought in for processing. There, women carefully washed and cleaned the fragments before sorting and matching them together, like amazingly complicated puzzles. But it was through their patience and skill, more than 150 bowls, oyas, and other ceramic vessels were successfully reconstructed for display, not only in the museum here, but it was also intended to provide objects for the then Smoke Eye Museum in Prescott. And it's also, although their contributions are often overshadowed in the traditional excavation reports and documentation, these women played a critical role in preserving and interpreting the material covered from the site. Their work also provided valuable economic opportunities during the time. There's another oral history that we have that one of these women who participated in the project recalled using her wages to help pay for her education at the University of Arizona, just supporting how that there was a lasting impact on these New Deal programs, both on the preservation, but also in supporting local community members. As the excavation brought national attention to the site, the discussions focused on the best way to long-term manage the place. Byron Cummings, we talked about earlier, he advocated that the state of Arizona should be responsible for protecting Arizona archaeological heritage. Others, including Grace Sparks, thought that the National Park Service would be the best direction for long-term stability. And in the end, the federal argument won out, and there was a long, complicated path towards the national monuments. If you remember, the property was still owned by the United Verde Copper Company at the time, and so there had to be several land transfers that went from the mining company to the local school district, and finally was able to be transferred to the federal land ownership. And this all took place through the Senate Bill 121. And in July 25th, 1939, President Franklin D. Roosevelt officially proclaimed Tuzigoot as the 27th national monument in the national park system. And at this point, Tuzigoot entered a new era of stewardship under the direction of the Park Service, focused on long-term preservation of the Pueblo. Sorry, going a little long here. Following the establishment of the National Monument in 1939, the Park Service began to transition from excavation and development projects to focusing on long-term preservation and visitor interpretation. Tara Smiley became the first National Park Service employee assigned to the monument, and among his early responsibilities were reorganizing museum exhibits, stabilizing deteriorating masonry, and improving visitor access to the site. During his initial assessment, Smiley recognized that many of the reconstructed walls completed during the 1930s work, the earlier 1930s work, were already showing signs of failure, and it highlights the ongoing challenges of preserving an excavated archaeological site. In 1940, John Cotter became Tuzigoot's first permanent custodian. Cotter played a pivotal role in both the preservation and interpretation of the monument during its formative years. And in addition to overseeing stabilization and maintenance efforts, he personally guided visitors through the ruins and developed an engaging interpretive program that helped bring Tuzigoot to life. His hands-on approach to visitor education fostered a deeper appreciation for the site's history and helped establish many of the interpretive traditions that would continue to on the monument for decades to come. So excavation brought Tuzigoot to the public attention, but it also exposed the architecture to weathering and erosion for the first time in centuries. As fragile masonry deteriorated, some preservation methods used in the 30s proved incompatible, and the original construction created additional challenges. By the early 40s, several of the walls had already become unstable and required temporary timber bracing to prevent collapse. To address the growing concerns, John Cotter worked with crews funded through the National Youth Administration. The NYA was one of the lesser known, but still highly influential New Deal programs. It was created in 1935 to provide employment, vocational training, and educational opportunities for young Americans between the ages of 16 and 25 who were struggling economically during this time. These crews at Tuzigoot composed primarily of local young men, many of whom were still in high school at the time, and they assisted with stabilization projects throughout the monument. They damaged masonry, reinforced vulnerable areas of the structure, and experimented with preservation techniques. Their efforts represent some of the earliest attempts to develop long-term preservation strategies for Tuzigoot and help lay the foundation for future conservation work at the monument. Through their labor, these young men became some of the first stewards specifically dedicated to preserving Tuzigoot for future generations. The preservation work under Cotter was then paused during the outbreak of World War II, where he went on to serve in the 357th Infantry Regiment of the 90 Division. Work did begin again in February of 1946. So just a handful of photos of those young men. I always find these interesting because typically you don't see folks as actively in these wall kind of before and after photos, but they really made sure that they were prominent within the pictures, and there's some great ones, including younger children that were on site. I should mention that that first photo of John Cotter, that one off to the right, was actually his daughter helping out at the time. And so, yeah, just some great photos of these young men that helped support preservation during that time. Into the 50s and 60s, there's kind of a new phase. The National Park Service had become to recognize that archaeological sites in the Southwest required this ongoing maintenance. It wasn't kind of a one and done philosophy, just because of their exposures and the challenges that are faced. During this period, the National Park Service established specialized mobile preservation units known as the Ruin Stabilization Unit, headquartered out of Gila Pueblo and Globe, Arizona. These crews moved between parks throughout the Southwest and provided technical expertise and conducted stabilization projects, responded to emergency preservation needs. Their work really helped address immediate threats to archaeological sites while advancing preservation techniques that would influence practices for many years to follow. And at that time, the Ruin Stabilization Unit was part of the broader National Park Service archaeological program in the Southwest. That program would later become associated with the Archaeological Center in Tucson, which is now known as the Western Archaeological and Conservation Center today. So these are just some interesting photos of the 1953 work. So the Navajo crews would set up tent camps by Peck's Lake. This 53 work, it was responsible for some pretty significant modifications to the Pueblo and kind of our current iteration of how visitors access certain parts of the Pueblo. So there were several major stabilization campaigns during this period. Once again, the constant struggle of trying to maintain the site. This included work by Roland Rickard, a prominent National Park Service archaeologist and preservation specialist, who helped pioneer modern stabilization practices through the Southwest, and literally wrote the book in 1971 on ruin stabilization. So he had a pretty significant impact. Other folks included Joel Shiner, another Park Service archaeologist, as well as Charles Vole, Martin Mayer, William Wagner, all archaeologists based out of Globe, and then later what would become WAC. But they focused on using local labor as well as specialized crews from Chaco Canyon. These folks from Chaco Canyon traveled to the monument and had extremely specialized skill sets in masonry repairs, drainage improvements. But among these crews were predominantly Navajo folks that provided their unique skill set. Unfortunately, like I mentioned about some of the names of folks, their names were never identified in any of the reports. They just were listed as Navajo crews and didn't give those individual recognition. However, today, as kind of an effort out of Chaco Canyon, is they've been working with their local communities to really try to identify those folks. Once again, we get these lists of just laborers and crews and these things, but it really is the people, and the recognition should be given when it's available. So right now, I'm working with those folks at Chaco to kind of help tease out the names of the folks that specifically could have participated and probably did help with some pretty significant work at Tuzigoot Pueblo. But that's not always the case. So the 1968 work, that's one of the first actual crew shots that we have where names are labeled. And so there's a mix of folks from that Navajo crew, but you'll see some like recognizable names like John Tavashi on there. So local laborers helped as well. We're coming to the period of the 1970s and 90s. This is kind of period where preservation shifted a little bit, and it was really focused more on park staff conducting work. The work never stopped, and it continues. Once again, every major weather event, there's always something that happens to the structure that needs work. But the focus ended up being more insular and having the monument staff assist with that. So the 1970s was a period that we saw several wall collapses and work was done. If you were up there, you'll see some kind of the identification of different colored stones in the wall, identifying that work. By the 1980s, there was a significant drain project. So there was a recognition of how water infiltration was one of the greatest threats to the long-term preservation. And so they conducted a pretty significant drainage repair project and stabilization. So while our documentation for this period is a lot more limited in generally, but there was still a lot of significant work taking place at the Pueblo. And then preservation work in the 90s. The nice part is we start to get crew identifications and knowing who some of these folks are. This period from the 70s, it kind of culminated in this 1992 major work that was done up there that was documented. We do know that there was a lot more maintenance based focus on the work, so a lot of more facility staff were working on walls and things were happening that weren't always being documented up there. And this kind of led to the gap to 1998 with the establishment of the Vanishing Treasures program in the National Park Service and funding that allowed for permanent staff that could be devoted to the preservation of what were identified as these vanishing treasures, these very important sites that were in danger of long-term degradation. So kind of getting towards the end here. The current, the current era of preservation that we're focused on today really began in that 1998 funding through the Vanishing Treasures program. Since then, preservation work has continued annually. It's continued constantly, but we're continued annually, but using the same methodology throughout the whole period. So not kind of changing as we go. But it's building on those decades and years of these earlier preservation campaigns. The program focuses on addressing on actually the unintended consequences of past stabilization treatments while ensuring the long-term survival of the original Pueblo masonry. The primary objective of the work now is the removal of the historic stabilization materials that were applied throughout the 20th century. More than 25 different mortar types were added to the walls, over 9 documented stabilization episodes, which essentially created a rainbow effect of colors up there, and each with various degrees of negative impacts to the walls, whether the Portland cement's often too hard, so during freeze thaw it would actually crush the original stones or create vapor barriers where moisture would get behind it and basically erode the original material behind it. So we've come up with a mix now where we use local clays sand. We'd still add a 3% Portland additive just to give a little bit more longevity, but we're not using that 100% Portland mix that's so much harder. The mix we have now allows for breathability and flexibility of the walls. So it's one of those we kind of have gone back to try to go back to what would have been used originally. Original materials we found are still by far the best. As much as we want to try to preserve things and come up with new things, the originals are often by far superior in the preservation. And we really work hard to work with tribal partners and use ethnographic accounts and a variety of other techniques to really understand what's best for the future of these structures. And so the other aspect is really trying to re-engage community engagement. It's evolved over time, but really also putting a focus on youth involvement. John Cotter was in the right direction using the NYA and having youth. So we've really kind of reinvigorated that and focused on using youth interns. We're on our 4th year of having a cohort of traditional trades advancement program interns, specifically tribal youth, to get them into the park and learn traditional skills. It's a great program because we're able to provide them skills, but they're also able to provide us knowledge that we wouldn't know otherwise, just from those experiences at home. And so it's a big focus. The Verde Valley Men's are a product of community-driven desire for preservation of these resources. And it's these community relationships that we really continue to hope to foster within our parks for many more generations and have these youth come in and be the next generation of stewards. So really, Tuzigoot represents far more than just a simple archaeological site. It's the product of generations of collaboration between all these folks in order to help preserve something important that it's one of the important symbols of our community, and it's intended to be that way. And we're hopefully on the Park Service side doing it justice by keeping it and preserving it and allowing visitors as well as the community an opportunity to come and experience it. So I always like this photo, just the connection of just the different layers of history that we have here in the valley, because there's so much time depth here and just so many different connections, but it all ties together to where we're at today. So that's my presentation for you all. Thank you. And I know it ran just a little late, but I don't know if we have time for any questions. Oh, yeah. So we do make a concerted effort to at least present it to the public as Tuzigoot. It would take an act of Congress to even unfortunately actually even change a couple letters to get it to the pronunciation. If there's enough push, it potentially could. We had tribal members that have focused on others like Montezuma Well. That's a place name that's a little easier to change, but it's a long process. But it just needs community support. Typically, it's not the Park Service itself that makes that push. Yeah, and we're definitely trying to move forward with that in general. Absolutely, yeah.
Montezuma's Castle as far as the time it was established?
So, Tuzigoot, it's much later. Montezuma Castle was actually the third national monument established. It was established in 1906, actually the first day. It was just on the list of where it fell in the stack of papers on signing from Theodore Roosevelt. So yeah, 33 years later. Yeah, yes, sorry, I think you were first.
I'd like to know if there's a publication on the talk that you just gave that is written in a book or something so that we could have it.
So there is, we do have an administrative history for the park that was written by Nancy Dillette. It's available on Amazon, but also the Verde Valley Archaeology Center helped us publish it. So there's physical copies over there. I delve a little bit more into the preservation side that's in there, but it's an amazing resource about the general area as well as Tuzigoot and it delves into some of like the Yavapai Apache Nation components. So if you're interested in that resource, it's a valuable one for understanding the history.
And where do I get a hold of that?
It's available on Amazon as well as like if paper copies. I think they have a few left at the Archaeology Center in Camp Verde.
In Camp Verde. Oh,
Yep.
okay, okay.
So I live in a house in the township, Lower Clarkdale. I was wondering, because the houses were full of miners, where did all of those people live? Were there tents or things for them, you know, in the early construction?
Most of them were they were the local miners that were just out of work during that period. So that they were living in the community, and this just helped supported them while the mine wasn't in operation during that period.
And so they worked for free?
No, they were getting paid. So out of that $27,000, most of that went to support paying them a living wage.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where are the artifacts that are not on display?
So anything that's not on display is located at the repository at WAC. It's the National Park Service repository in Tucson. In Tucson, yeah.
At WAC, that
The Western Archaeological Conservation
And
Center.
Is some of the money being used to conserve and continue to study those artifacts as well as the building?
So right now they're mostly being stored just for protection purposes. We do have researchers and various other folks that have gone in there. Because we're not doing excavation and pretty much in general in the Park Service for the most part. They're available for study because the focus at the point of the excavation was really to populate museums and provide those objects of greatest visual interest. But there's a plethora of objects in there that have a really enormous intrinsic value in understanding a wide breadth of different things. So we do have researchers that do come in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so.
Are there plans for further excavation and anything for the 100-year anniversary?
Nothing yet. So we don't generally we don't excavate because just it's not really in our mission at this point. It's really to preserve what's there, and archaeology is a destructive field. So anything that we excavate, it's essentially gets destroyed. So the only time that we ever really put a shovel to the ground is if we have to put in some sort of like infrastructure project or like sign installation that we'll do a limited excavation prior, just to make sure that things are at least documented. But it's pretty rare. We're still a little ways out for the 100-year, but we're still really kind of, focused. Right now, we're focused on the 120th year for Montezuma Castle. That's this year. But yeah, we'll be doing something, I'm sure. Oh, I don't. Opposite sides.
So among the groups that were involved in the excavation, was the CCC Corps ever part of that?
It was slightly different because it was all different New Deal era funding programs.
Okay.
So it wasn't specifically the Civil Conservation Corps. It was WPA funds that pretty much tried to focus on the local community, but was funded through kind of different channels.
Oh, okay.
I understand there was human remains found during the excavation. What happened to those remains?
So those, I don't know if any of you have heard of NAGPRA, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. So those have all been repatriated to the tribes. Specifically the Hopi tribe. I'm sorry? So there are clan connections. So specifically, the Bluebird clan at Hopi identifies Tuzigoot as an ancestral home. I keep driving this. No, but we do. Not specifically. We do have members that do come and do various things. It's kind of between them and the place. So we help support that, but we don't kind of facilitate or more than and letting them do what they need to do. Oh, yeah.
Can you give the spelling of that alternative name?
Yes. So it's more phonetic, but if you instead of the G to put a WH, like
Yeah, it's kind of like saguaro. We don't say saguaro.
yeah. So
So if you think of it like that.
like I say, if you do it phonetically, it would be like WHODT, but it's still spelled basically the same way.
Is there any preservation of the agricultural activities?
Are you talking about like historic agricultural activities? I'm sorry?
Of the native Pueblo?
So most of the agricultural fields were the same ones that were used historically. There were some documented references to irrigation canals up into the 1970s as far as offshoots of the Verde, kind of going towards Tavashi Marsh. But just because of a lot of historic activities, most of the pre-contact stuff had been kind of plowed over time. And so it really kind of, Tuzigoot Ridge became an island of preservation for the pre-contact components. But once again, it was folks were using the best arable land. So folks 1,000 years ago were using pretty much the same fields that they were using up until more recently.
You mentioned the natural springs earlier. What part are like the irrigation ditches part of the natural springs, or is it in Tavashi Marsh? Or
It's in Tavashi Marsh.
yeah.
So
Now,
the marsh is
does it
spring-fed.
still exist?
It does, yes.
It seems pretty dry over there now.
And part of that it's because we're seeing fluctuations because Peck's Lake no longer exists with
Right.
the diversion dam being removed and
Yeah.
water not flowing in there.
Did it flow into Peck's Lake?
It did, yeah. The diversion dam flowed into
Okay.
Peck's Lake, and there was water that came from kind of Peck's Lake to kind of feed.
Are
that
they
system.
ever going to redo Peck's Lake? That was such a beautiful area.
Not that I'm aware of, but that's definitely out of my.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't.
Oh,
I
that's too
haven't
bad.
heard anything. I don't see it
Okay,
happening.
okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Can you comment on any parrot remains that were found in the excavations at Tuzigoot?
Yeah, so there were a couple scarlet macaw remains that were found. There's not a lot to say other than that they were found there. They were in what appeared to be somewhat formal kind of burials kind of situation. So they were formally interred. And so it's indicative of that there was an importance to them. But kind of outside of that, there's not much else, not a lot to say about it. But just knowing that macaws indicate those longer trade connections going all the way down towards the Yucatan and moving up towards like Casas Grande and Paquime and Sonora. So just these kind of connections across the landscape.
When they were excavating, did they also excavate any of the other ruins around the valley here? I thought they did the one that was just to the south.
They did. So they also did, these were limited excavations, but they did limited excavations at Hatalakfa. It's now the Archaeological Conservancy property, just on the ridge over there. But they also did what was called the Tuzigoot Extension Ruin, which was just on the other side of the river there. Yeah.
Small children passed away. They were buried in their parents' rooms, and that when it was excavated, there were children's remains in the floor here.
So just with a kind of a quick caveat, just out of respect for tribal partners, we really don't talk about human remains generally, other than that there were remains found. So I'm going to kind of leave that as an open-ended question, just like I say, out of respect for tribal partners that don't want us to really go into depth about that. If you are interested, there is documentation out there, and I kind of apologize for skirting the question, but once again, I'm talking with folks. I try to respect their wishes.
Any other questions? Yes. Thank you for coming. Hope you enjoyed the presentation.